Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this fascinating session. We have two stars with us. Let me start with Swati Piramal, who everyone knows is an epitome of the heights that women can scale in India. And Swati is vice chairman of the Piramal Group, where she oversees a global business conglomerate with diverse interests in pharmaceuticals, which I knew her best, and of course, financial services and real estate. And she is one of India's leading scientists and industrialists who's contributed substantially to the innovations in medicine, new medicines as well, and public health that has touched all our lives. And she's played a pivotal role, mind you, in shaping policies that have improved public health care in India, and is also a philanthropist. As director of the Piramal Foundation, she was telling me of some of the wonderful work that she's been doing. Let's give her a very warm round of applause. And as is very fitting, though we might be two against one, she's going to dominate us in many senses. But we have Dr. Anish Shah, who's Group CEO and MD of the Mahindra Group. He oversees over 260,000 associates across 20 industries and over 100 countries. And his primary focus is to bring tech leadership to Mahindra, apart from the fact that he's into purpose-driven organizations and creating value across businesses, and of course fits very well with the Mahindra's RISE philosophy, which is how to bring positive change, and that too in gender equity. So we have a very interesting session, and we'll start with you, Dr. Swati Piramal. You have been someone, we were talking about, the subject is all about boards, women in top positions. And you have, in many senses, straddled all these, not just in India, but in very large multinational corporations. What is the difference you have seen while dealing with Indian companies, or being on the boards of Indian companies, as well as when you are on boards of, many of the best foreign companies in the world?
Well, thank you for inviting me here. And I was reflecting on this question, but it's very interesting to see. When I had experience on boards in the United States, in France, in Italy, Australia, Qatar, in many countries, actually culture is different. It's chalk is to cheese. And I'd like to give you an example. In India, where boards are concerned, especially in my own company, we don't treat board members like ships that pass by through the night. We make sure that their advice is given to us even after they leave the board. And that you have this warm, hand of friendship from the most clever people across India, across the world actually, when they're on your board. I remember one night one of our board members was in the ICU. My husband and I stayed up all night outside, waiting for him to get better. Now this I don't think I would see in any of the boards that I sit on abroad. They have business is separate, personal is separate. But I think in the Indian way, in a way, is more human. It respects people even after they leave. It retains a lifelong friendship with people who are on your board. And that's the way I think we get the best out of our board.
But let's come to gender parity. I mean, this is today's Women's Day, and we need to discuss when women get onto the board. Is there a difference? Firstly, the struggle to get on the board, and secondly, the attitude of other board members if you are not vice chairman or just one of the board members. Do you find that? And you can do international comparisons as well if you...
Oh yes, I remember I was on the board of Harvard University. And that's an election of worldwide alumni. And I was told that no Indian has ever stood on this board. It's 350 years old, very, very prestigious. And so I, asked, not afraid of failure. I said, that's fine. I'm not afraid to fail. And, but tell me who else has not stood for this election and not been elected. And they said, well, we remember it was Barack Obama and it was Bobby Kennedy. And so, they didn't get elected. And nobody from India has ever been elected. But I said, never mind, I'll still stand for the election. And we are not allowed to canvass. And it's by all living alumni across the world. And to my surprise, I won. And it was a 6-year term, 6 times a year, traveling to Boston, It was an amazing experience for me because on the board were the brightest people in the world. You still studied with case studies. As you know, you went to Harvard too. And you get the best knowledge. So what a precious time, what a precious gift of knowledge I got just because I dared to do it. And I think women should not be afraid of failure. You know, just keep trying and persevering because you will get there.
I like the words that you use. Not afraid of failure, just do it
Yeah.
and dare to do it.
Dare to do it.
Let's give a very warm round of applause for that. And a big, big lesson for us. I'm going to come to you, Dr. Shah, and gender change and Mahindra Group. How are you? You talked of positive change, Mahindra's rise. Are you driving change on the gender side? Is there a rise for all your women employees? What is the percentage that you're trying to bring in, not just in the board, but across all your employees?
So let me start with some facts, but before I do that, a very happy Women's Day to everyone. Gender diversity, diversity across the board and inclusive culture are one of the most important priorities that we have. This is one thing that we've recognized is critical for us to be a global leader because it makes a huge difference in terms of how we operate, in terms of the decisions we make. So let me start with some facts on that. In the current fiscal year, which is almost ending, we look at three groups in terms of senior management, mid-management, and junior associates. At corporate at Mahindra, of everyone we hired in senior management, 87% were women.
Are women?
87%.
Wow.
Thank you for the applause, but I shall very respectfully not take that because we have a long way to go. Right? The absolute numbers today are not one that we are happy with at all. Right? And that's something that we have to change significantly. So I shall hold that applause for a few years later when we have changed that, in which point we shall accept it. But that's the effort we are making. At mid-management, 47% hired were women. At associate level, 44%. And we've done that through a variety of ways. The one thing that we have not done is to set targets. And this is something that has been based on inputs that we got from all the women leaders. I meet with them every quarter. And many of them said, we don't want to be in a position ever that someone says that you're here because there was a target or a quota. We want to earn our place, and that's the right way to do it, because it has to be a meritocracy. But the number of things we've done are, one, to ensure that before any slate of candidates is picked, we have women leaders on that slate. And I've had personally discussions with search firms sometimes who've told us that, well, we can't find anyone. And I said, well, we're not going to start interviewing then. They said, but we've tried everything. We said, fine, we'll look for another search firm.
Wonderful.
But that's been one. Second is creating a culture that is truly inclusive, because it's not just about hiring. It's about what happens when they are in the organization. Do they have a voice? How do they operate? Do they feel that they are equal with others? That's a very important part of culture. We've had to change certain policies. We've introduced a policy for maternity for women, which is effectively a 5-year policy that helps them through childcare, that allows flexibility. And we feel that these are things that are essential for women at times when they need it. And therefore, our policy should be adaptable to allow for that. So there's a whole host of things we're doing across every level to be able to create that. But as I said, we have a long way to go. So it's one where this journey will take us to a much better place, but we are nowhere near where we need to be today.
But let's give a warm round of applause to him, to Dr. Anisha and the Mahindra Group for bringing that change in this. You're driving it virtually and with the percentages that you talked about. Dr. Piramal, I'm going to come to an area that is your favorite area, which is you've been on a lot of advisory council on industry, trade, science and research, art and technology also. You have some of the finest collections, I think. Can you tell us, what do women directors bring on the board? Which is different from the males, of course.
Yeah, so let's talk about in government and in particularly government institutes, where, when I was president of ASSOCHAM, I was the first woman in 90 years. So what I did was a neat trick. I made every single industry leader in the Apex Chamber of Commerce a woman. And so they were in charge of nuclear energy, of highways, of medicine, of finance, of you name it. There were 100 women on the stage with me. And of course, that brought change. That brought policy change, that brought change in banking, that brought change in taxation, that brought change in so many areas. So the way to do it is to bring women to the top and really get them to change things. In science is a difficult question because many women who are scientists, when they have children, they go away and don't come back to science. And so we started what I call the Marie Curie project and started to think about how women would come back to work. And, like you said in your industry, in R&D, we had very few women. But when I started to do my R&D, got it to up to 50%. And one of the things that really helped me was to clean up the computers to make sure that people were treated on merit and respectfully, and to really give people a chance to be a leader. And so that, I think, giving that chance, getting them into leadership, getting them back to work, and really changing the policy across the nation, in whichever industry it is, that helped me a lot. And it effected really phenomenal change.
Round of applause for that. I think that's very sage advice. And you're president of FICCI at the moment. Swati Piramal talked about her experience in ASSOCHAM. What is the kind of culture you would like for all your FICCI members to bring about gender awareness, gender change? Are you in any way moving that ball forward in FICCI?
So we have 4 priorities in FICCI this year that link to the Prime Minister's priority on Viksit Bharat. Make in India, women-led development, farmer prosperity, and sustainability.
Wow.
And there are a series of efforts on women-led development. One is around corporate India and working with our members to start looking at data, to start helping them make this a priority, and in some ways trying to bring the message of inclusive culture across corporate India. The second part is skilling of women. This is something we started at the Mahindra Group. Our target is to skill 1 million women every year.
Right.
Not that we can give them 1 million jobs, but we want to create a platform where with a number of other companies, we can provide the skilling that they need in their localities across the country and enable various companies to be able to offer jobs to them. At FICCI, we want to take that and multiply that exponentially. And that's a kind of platform we're looking to set up. We're working with the Ministry of Education to be able to take some of the ITIs, transform them, and we are hoping that we can create that kind of a platform that allows people to come in and be able to skill women and take them forward. Participation for women in the labor force is very low now.
Correct.
The numbers keep jumping around.
About 20%.
It is 20, yeah, right around 20%. There was some recent reports that it was much higher, but I think I would question some of the way they look at those numbers. But that participation has to go up significantly. And then the other part we're doing in FICCI is how do we create a care economy? So if women have to go and work, then is there a care economy that takes care of elderly at home, that takes care of children at home? And how do we enable that? What are the policies that the government needs to bring in to enable that as well? So these are some of the things we're driving today.
And this segues well into the next question that for you, because you've worked very closely in rural areas as well as in urban areas. Your work on philanthropy is sort of spread far and wide. If you have to look at a couple of things, one, what we talked, improving the female percentage in the workforce. The second is pay parity. I mean, the studies have shown that women get almost 20-30% less, or even 40% less than what men do at work. What would your advice be, particularly because you advise government on some of these issues? 2 or 3 things that you think we need to do urgently.
So for me, I think pay parity is not something that I really worry about.
Mm-hmm.
The reason is because the women who need the help don't even have jobs, And in the aspirational districts where 100 million of our citizens live, that's really not an issue. And the 100 million where our tribal people live, that's also not an issue.
Right.
So for me to, what's my priority? Infant and maternal mortality, that women should not die having children, and babies should not die when they are born. To me, that as a medic, sorry, but that gets first priority. And getting these numbers down in the remotest areas of India, the northeast, for example, I have 800 people working there, or in our border areas, a line of control, mothers don't get any help at all. Am I to worry about pay parity? No, I only worry about whether the baby dies or whether the baby lives, whether the mother dies or the mother lives. And to me, if I can get that down, and how am I thinking about doing it, is to involve young medical interns to go into these areas and really become leaders, to learn compassionate leadership, seva bhav. If I can change 100 leaders to work in these areas and really create systems change, systems thinking, and that, because medical education hasn't changed in 70 years. And so if I can get that systems change into healthcare and sustainability and water, that is what I would look at first. Pay parity when they get a job and things, I will worry about that later.
And increasing the female participation in the workforce?
Yes, that. But where will they find work in the tribal areas? Where will they find work in aspirational districts or even on border areas? So I think there's a way to go. First, I must look at basic survival.
Mm-hmm. And you talked about maternal mortality, which is among the highest in the world. Though we have improved considerably, I think it's still about 113 to 1 lakh. Whereas in states like countries like USA, it's about 20, China's even 17, 18. That's the kind of target that you are talking about in this.
Yes,
am I right?
especially in aspirational areas where 112 of our districts are the lowest in the world, and they have much lower than the national average. So how can I change that? I mean, I can not have, one person or one company, one foundation can't do it. So the way we're thinking about it is to get young people to go and do systems change in these areas. Give you an example, line of control in Kashmir. I had young people bring down nomadic people to an institutional delivery, and then the 100% institutional delivery decreased maternal mortality and infant mortality significantly. And it was all done by young kids, 18, 20 years old. So if I can get those people to work there and to work in very, very far-flung areas, for example, Mizoram, the Ganges, and places where there's no even health care because the Ganges spates and flows, and there is no fixed healthcare system. So if I can handle these difficulties with people on the ground, with young people, giving them leadership, we call them Gandhi Fellows. They work with us for 2 years. There are 5,000 of them, and they go out across India, from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, and they do systems change.
Wow. Amazing, amazing. I think we have time only for a final round, and I'm going to come to you, Dr. Anisha, and this is more personal in some senses, okay? You're in a leadership position. How do you see yourself playing a role in accelerating gender equity in your company first and around you and your environment?
So on the personal note, let me share why this is so important. My mother was an IIM Ahmedabad graduate from the second batch. Only one of 2 women at that time, in 1966.
So now we know where your genes come from.
She set up her own firm, a startup, in the late 60s. My father was at IIM Ahmedabad as well and a multinational, so he had a full-time job. And she wanted to balance bringing up children and doing something that she wanted as well. And she set up a business that did printing and packaging and made paperboard cartons for Colgate toothbrushes and toothpaste and so on. And could come home at 3 o'clock when my sister and I came back from school. So we've seen her work through that.
Wow.
And do that at a time when startups were nowhere popular, and women CEOs didn't quite exist. So having grown up in that environment, this is something that is very important from an equity standpoint, and that I think is something that it's important for us to do, to leave behind, because it's not just corporate India that needs to change, society needs to change.
Yes.
And how do we drive that change in society is important.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Swati Piramal, you're going to get the last word, and this is a personal question. You've achieved so much. How did you work out the work-life balance? You have children, grew up, you also achieved a lot. What did you do? What is the secret of your success? 3 or 4 points.
Yeah, I just never let it get me that I'm a doctor and my children, want to come home at 3 o'clock for my children. But you have to manage everything. And the way you can do it, I think, is by knowledge. You can jumpstart everything that you do with knowledge. For example, in Assocham, I never knew anything about finance. I would ring all my friends in ICICI Bank and say, what shall I say to the Reserve Bank governor? And I would read 1,000 pages before I went and opened my mouth. So women jumpstart everything by knowledge. And they really network much better. And those are one thing that I learned in my career. And secondly, my daughter once told me, Mom, I'm so glad that you're working and that I can learn from you and I can be better than you when I grow up. And she was very tiny at that time. And I'm happy to say she's now the chairperson of the company. And I have finished. So I was telling Vishakha, I'm looking for a new career. And maybe the new career will be in medicine, is where I feel the need the greatest. And so that's the way you think about it, the way you leverage knowledge, you leverage technology, you leverage innovation, and never feel afraid to fail.
I'm just going to ask you a final question on this, and it is, when you look back over there, and what would you say would you have changed? Anything?
No, I don't think I would have. I think I'm really blessed to have this wide experience. We started with On the Boardroom. As you asked me, what did you think and reflect about the boardroom? My gosh, I mean, I'm so blessed to work in so many boards, so many different companies, meet so many people from all walks of life, and really learn from them. And it never get me down that I'm a doctor. I'm not supposed to know banking, but I always learned. And I learned so much from my colleagues. I learned so much from other faculty. I learned so much from other people on the board. So being in the boardroom was one of the best parts of my life.
And what is the difference a woman brings to the boardroom? What is that special quality that men seem to lack? If you had 2 or 3 qualities, what would women bring onto the boardroom?
So I think number one is compassion. It's a compassionate way of thinking.
Yes.
And I call it an Indian name, Seva Bhav. I feel bringing Seva Bhav in everything you do, whether it's at work, whether it's in the way you treat people, or the way you think about the difference that you can make. If you can do Seva Bhav, I feel that that Indian way of thinking can get India much ahead of every country in the world.
So empathy and compassion.
Yeah, it's actually not easily translatable to empathy. Seva means service, Bhav means the spirit of service.
And let's give Swati Piramal a very warm round of applause and Dr. Anisha for this wonderful session. Thank you very much.